We had a little bit of a question as well about sample libraries from Damo in the group. So he was. I'll just read it because it's an interesting question for anybody who's starting out. Really, he's looking to buy his first few sample libraries.
Mm-hmm.
So where's he put? Has he put it in here? Yeah. So he says, still researching to put this grant together. I'm pretty sure he'd like to get BBCSO core, but also wanted to take my advice with Berlin brass and perhaps CSS. But he's afraid that if both of those were to make it into his template, what's really the point of core if only being used the woodwind and percussion? So basically the question, I think, is that why would you want more than one library to do the same thing? Because I know we both do this, but there's a reasoning why we go and get a few libraries to
So I would probably recommend the first one is getting some kind of full. The BBCSO is probably a good one to start with, even if it's just a free one, just to start with, just so you've got something to write with. Like, this is orchestral music, obviously. If you're doing pop music, then it's irrelevant. But if you're doing orchestral music, getting some kind of free orchestral thing to start with, and then roughly what the sound of the free one will be, and then watch the demos and listen to which one you think is best. I would maybe go for the core of BBCSO, just as a kind of, then you've got everything covered as a template thing. Then when you start going, I want more things to fill in with, then you start buying other things, because you might want to you buy to strengthen up the weaknesses that the one library has, or sometimes layering is a really good option, because you might have the strings are great at one thing, but then they're a little bit weak in other areas. So say you've got this legato line and you just want it sort of a bit softer, so you might want an extra string library on top, like say LA scoring strings or CSS, or there's thousands you could go for, and I'd say it's one for layering. And then the reason why you might want, I wouldn't go for the individual libraries first, is because then you've got a gap in your repertoire. If you go for the overall library, like Albion or BBCSO, then that gives you a palette to start with. You don't have just strings and brass, but then I need some woodwinds. I don't have any at all, if that makes sense. It's better to start with something overall that might not be quite as detailed and in depth, and then add to that and give you some more in depth palette colors, if that makes sense. I don't know whether I was that clear on that, but
no, very clear. So I'd probably just add as well that you're always, with any library that you get, you kind of you're always torn between two places, and that's paddy sounds and detail, and every library sways between those two places, and you need both. You do need both. So for me, I would probably say stay away from Albion, at least Albion 1. I would personally stay away from that from your first library. And that was my first library. And
my first one as well.
Yeah, and I think at the time I thought, wow, this is so good. It does all of this amazing stuff. But then you haven't got flexibility with it, because they're not individual patches. So you're not going to learn much about orchestration, because they all kind of sound like pads. And I think Christian Henderson even says that's how he uses it. He uses Albion 1 as a pad, and that's how I use it. I just use it if I want to get something down quick, I just want to get a sound bed down, I'll use Albion 1, and that's really good now that you can do that. But then the detail isn't there. For like...
The one thing... sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, the detail isn't there for like solo lines. So like, like moving on to core and being a symphony orchestra core, the one thing that you have got is you've got a breadth of like the whole orchestra to use, and you can use them for individual lines. And that is like so much more freeing. I think actually it's probably the best library out there, for not just starting out now, because it's just had a major update. It's really, really good. But then if you're not adept to, for writing individual parts, then maybe Albion 1 is the way to go. But there is a learning curve either way you go, isn't there, Sam?
Oh yeah, and with each library there will be slight differences. Like if you just play, say, on the longs patch and you just play everything on that, it's going to sound terrible. Yeah. Obviously, then that's the reason why it has.
So I've got the cello up here from Core, and technically, if it plays, I don't even know if it'll play. So this is the longs patch. This is the kind of sound. It's not going to be as detailed as this in Albion, but this is the sound. I'll use the mod wheel as well. So that kind of sound, it's great for a pad, but then you haven't got any legato lines. So over that, you couldn't play. You couldn't play a line like that, and have that much detail, and then have all of these patches as well. You got concertino, flautando, spiccato, staccato, pizzicato, collegno, tremolo, loads of different types of trills, saltasto, harmonics, short harmonics, Bartok snap, which he calls Bartok pizzicato. It's a silly name for it. Bartok snap, long marcato, tremolo concertino, sul ponte, and spiccato. So like how much variety?
It's much more in depth.
Yeah, you've got so much, and that's gonna because I'm just saying this, Sam, as well, because just had a reply saying that that he wants to learn more orchestration with it. So BBCSO is like it's the number one in my opinion, at least, to get. It's got its flaws. Don't get me wrong. Like, I would love to be able to get this patch to actually get two different articulations to play at the same time whilst it's in the same player. That would be really, really handy. It doesn't do that.
Can you not do that? I don't have BBC.
No. Well, I think they're still developing. They're still developing it, Sam, aren't they? So it's only been out a year, I think.
Something like that. I went to the launch. It was a little bit more. It was 2019. I think about October 2019.
Yeah, so about a year and a quarter, year and a half, something like that. Mm-hmm. So that it's a very, very early stages player. So they'll be thinking about adding things like that, as time goes on. What are the pluses for you, Sam? With Albion, I'll just get it up so we can have a look at it as well.
Okay, so Albion, I would say, is good for sketching. It's a good way to just get your ideas quickly out there and sound relatively good straight out of the box. You don't really need to be really thinking about what the violins are playing versus the violas, especially if you use the ensemble patches where you just play with both hands on the keyboard and kind of write with it as opposed to playing in lines. I also find, so these are the two times when I use it. If I'm just writing and I'm just improvising on my keyboard and coming up with a progression or something, and then I'll go in afterwards and either replace it or add other things over the top. The other time I use it is when I use it in a track, like an orchestral track, the other day, because I was writing this kind of sweeping string line, legato string line, and I used LA scoring strings for the main string line, and then it was just sounded a bit weak. So I actually used Albion 1's high strings legato as just a pairing through it. So because it's quite a thick sound, it thickened up the sound quite a lot, and I personally don't see any problem with using it that way. And it complemented the problems that LA scoring strings had, which had a lot of detail and a lot of crispness to it, but it didn't have the big, thick, legato, smooth line that I wanted. It was sort of getting a little lost in the mix because it's quite a busy mix. There was a lot of brass, there was a lot of percussion, a lot of other string ostinatos going on, and I needed this line to just sort of soar over the top. And the LA scoring strings weren't cutting through, so I just stuck Albion 1 on the top, and it did. But like them two paired were an amazing string sound. So.
Yeah, that's the main thing, isn't it? When you're pairing different libraries, you're usually looking for one with lots of detail and one with no detail at all, which sounds really sounds bad when you say it like that, but like you'll hear now that like Albion 1 strings are so smooth. That is what they do best, isn't it? There's no like you can't hear the bow noise on it. It's not that type of library. So when you're actually using it, you're always going to want that extra layer, aren't you, on top? So yeah, I've got it. I think
some more detail.
There you go. You can hear it at least. And on that legato patch, because what they've actually done, and this is probably why it takes up so much memory, is because it is that they're all in octaves. So it's really nice for that that blending in with another library. So if I just go and get Spitfire Studio strings, I'm not going to get the I'm not going to get the Pro version, just the normal version. Which, by the way, Pro is awesome. I love it. I'll just get the first violins in at the same time, so in the same patch, and you guys at home will hear just how like adding this extra layer in now just adds so much detail. Yeah, so I'll just turn that studio strings up a little bit so you can hear it. Yeah, so that's kind of how you'd want to use it. You'd always, with Albion 1, it does sound beautiful, but at the same time, there are things in that as well that you wouldn't necessarily, like. So at the moment, we're using the tree mic in Albion 1. I personally do not like the tree mic, so I would rather the close mic and the surround. Yeah. So if I just turn them both on, don't know if this will be loaded up. So you can hear there already what's happened is that all of that mid-range build-up at the bottom is near enough gone. So it's just natural. It's just natural now. So I generally, when I'm thinking about Albion 1 and like a lot of those Spitfire libraries, the tree mics are great for adding that width and girth and stuff. But like usually, and Sam would probably say the same, is you're EQing a lot of that out afterwards, aren't you?
I tend to, especially the more dense your what is it? The more dense your orchestration and like more parts you've got in, that will build up. And I tend to like put some EQ on the strings bus and cut out some low mids. I cut out a lot low end as well. Obviously, you don't want to cut it all out because unless you're really going for, I sometimes cut out a lot of low end on some ostinato patches, just if I want like the top end. But you don't want to really be doing too much EQing, but you do end up having to do a bit of a scoop in the low mids. I find a lot with Spitfire.
Yeah, so the way to get around that with Spitfire is literally just to take that tree mic out, add the close in, and you can have the outriggers, which are just the surround mics, and then you don't get that mid build up as much. And then all you actually need to do with your EQ is just take that bottom end off. So that's my workaround for that. And it just means that I don't have to really think. All I have to make sure that I watch out for is that, the percussion are coming through at the bottom. That is.
Mm-hmm.
But that's mainly because when I'm mixing as well, I use saturation a lot to help the high end come out. Whereas Sam, you quite like to EQ with your fancy EQs, don't you?
I mean, like you say, fancy EQs. I like it as well. As much as I have like the Fab filter EQs and things, like a lot of the time I just find myself reaching for like the standard stock Logic EQ or standard Logic compressors and things like I don't think there's a there are certain things that like the EQs do that the Logic one can't, such as like splitting the left and right speakers or like soloing a specific frequency so you can hear any problems as you sweep through. But like in terms of the actual EQ curves and things, like they're very similar, and most of the time like the ones that come straight with Logic or Pro Tools or Cubase or whatever you use will be exact, like they'll be good enough.
Yeah, definitely. So let's look at some unusual libraries now. So Sam, if you get an unusual library up ready, we won't see your screen, but you can just tell us what the library is. I'm going to get the British Drama Toolkit. I'm going to go on samples.
Sprung this on me. What do I get up?
You've got enough libraries to choose from.
I do.
I'll start then whilst you're looking.
Sure.
So then once you've got that kind of stuff, what you want to do next is add things and buy things that are going to make your tracks stand out, make it a bit more interesting. For me, I don't buy a lot of these at all. I usually make them, and Sam is like my number one customer. but
I've used a couple of your tracks in library tracks that are out there in the world now. So or your whatever they're called, libraries. That's the word I'm looking for.
That's the one. Yeah, but it's so useful, isn't it? To make your own sounds, because you do a lot more buying of libraries, don't you? Whereas I do the opposite. I buy a lot more instruments, which you can see just from like the onslaught of instruments in my room. I've got loads of that I want to actually record and make more libraries of. But the reason why I do that is that you get a different sound from a library, don't you, Sam? So
I'm definitely an advocate of recording your own things and just improvising and trying out things and see how. Like if you get a bought library, like other people who've got that library are going to have a similar sound to you. If you use I recently bought a violin, and you've got a violin, and
I used it today.
Just
actually.
using that, and or like I've also got a xylophone. I've got some bongos. I've got some maracas. I've got my own drum kit. I've got a synth, I like a analog synth. I find actually using real instruments almost, as much as like obviously the virtual instruments are real instruments, but using real world instruments, like it gives you a uniqueness that only you have, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's why, like, especially like just the nuances in tonality as well, if it's slightly sharp or slightly flat. A lot of the time I don't bother. I mean, if it's really far out, I'll be like, okay, right, that needs like pulling in. That note is way too flat or sharp. But you know, most of the time, if it's just a little bit either side, when you've played it in or something, that's actually really good. That's a good thing that it's not perfect. And that's what you get, isn't it, from like playing in your own instruments and like learning all of these new instruments that you might purchase. Is that it's never going to be perfect, and the imperfection actually is what makes it good.
It's the humanity to it. If you have too much that's dead on, you lose the realism, and you lose the humanity to it. I think it's the same argument, I guess, as
Sorry.
It's the same argument, I guess, as like what am I thinking? Same argument as like overly quantizing drums or overly tuning vocals and things. If you do it too much, you lose the actual thing that made it good in the first place. Yeah. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of problems. Like if you play it completely out of time, then or completely out of tune, then that's wrong. That just won't fit.
Yeah.
But it's those little subtleties, like something that's not very deep sampled, I find, is actually a better sample library usually, because it has those nuances that get lost with deep sampling and like massive orchestras and things.
Yeah, I think like you know, with like string libraries are a really good example of this. But with those kind of libraries, you know, really heavily sampled libraries, all of those samples merge into one, don't they? And it gets too much. So you need a little bit of both, I find. Whereas like I don't really like the idea of this term deep sampling, because it can be deep sampled, but you know, in terms of the sampling that you've chosen, or the person who's made, you know, the instrument, the deep sampling can actually be in actually just really finessing the sounds, which is what we're going to go on to now with this British Drama Toolkit. So what they've done in this library is they've really paid attention to nuances that you might have, you know, like whether you're tuning up, like an orchestra's tuning up or whatnot, or, you know, just playing short staccatissimo notes and soft pads mixed in and stuff. But they're all orchestral textures that they've done. So you can see here on your screen, it's got texture soft and loud. So if I just play nice and soft, let's pick A minor. I'll just hold that down. Probably just turn this up as well. So you can hear that actually so this is bass, clarinets. So the basses are actually they're stopping and then starting again at different times, and the clarinets are stopping and starting at different times, you know, reblowing and whatnot. If we go a little bit lower,
it's really good for that kind of. I find that's really good for sketching and coming up with an idea very quickly.
Yeah, I just inspiration, right? It's just an inspiration thing. So if I just wanted to play some chords, let's go a little bit higher. So that's my chord progression. But then, so they've also got like, that's just the texture side. If I just play it like a little bit harder, all of a sudden you've got these swelling, beautiful things, and then you've got like so that's just the longs patch, which includes them all. But then if you just wanted the soft in texture, you could just have that. But let's go into the fortissimo for that sound. This is just the soft in texture now, but it's just loud. Yeah, so you can have that, and it's fine. Or these lovely fluty sounds. This one needs to be higher. Yeah, just nuances in there. So you can imagine with these types of sounds, they are really, really good just for layering in with those other patches. So Sam, I'm going to get this up. Do you want to tell them what you've chosen?
Yeah, I was a sum up between, and these are both Spitfire ones actually. It was a sum up between Olaf Arnold's Evolutions and the Liquid Orchestra, what's it called, Orchestral Swarm, and I use both of them all the time. So I'm actually using Olaf Arnold's Evolutions, and this is just on I've put randomize within episodic. So now I'm just going to play an E minor chord. Like, it has so much detail in it. Yeah. Or I could put subtle, so you can have more subtle swells. Now, obviously, on their own, they're not that strong. But if you layer them, I tend to layer them with Spitfire's chamber strings, and it just they pop out the mix. The other one I was going to show was the whatever it's called. I've got to find it. What was it called that I said? Orchestral Swarm.
Yeah. Well, whilst you're doing that, I'll show like layering. So if I was to layer Albion 1 with BDT.
Oh yeah, sure, do that. Do that.
Then this is how it would sound. And what I've done here is that I'm starting with the mod wheel down, so you can start just with the British Drama Toolkit. I'm actually gonna find just a strings patch in here. String ensemble. So this is what this sounds like. So it's just as detailed, you'll notice, as what Sam said, but the difference is that the swells aren't as vibrant, which I'm probably going to get that now, Sam. It's been on my wish list for a while actually, which Val has said that she's wanting them now as well. But yeah, so
sorry
like
for a gear acquisition syndrome.
Oh, I know, don't worry. So this is the sound, but then you'll notice that I'll bring up the mod wheel, and then the other patch will come in as well. So it's almost like two separate sounds, but you only need one Kontakt player.
Yeah, I love that sound.
There we go. So it can be as simple, but yet as beautiful as that, can't it? With like two, you could just be layering and stacking these as well, couldn't you? as you go.
Yeah, that's one way that you can create your own sound as well by the way you stack them. So if you stacked British Drama Toolkit with Albion 1 or Albion 5 is great for this sort of sound. Albion 5 is really good.
I haven't
for
got
this sort of
Albion
sound.
5 actually. I'd quite like that. Is that Tundra or is that it's Tundra? Isn't
Tundra,
it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Neo is another one that's
I think
Albion
that's
6, I think,
yeah.
which is similar.
It's the only other Albion I think I would ever get is Tundra, and I've never really had use for it because those kind of sounds I'm always adding in myself anyway. But yeah, it's just wow, isn't it? I'm just loading up as well this Woodwinds High, but I'm going to use the longer ranged as well. Like if I was to use these 3 now, this will and I'm also going to put in the brass mids, because when they say brass mids in Albion 1, it's just the horns, isn't it, Sam?
Mostly, yeah.
I don't hear anything else in there really. There might be like the low end of the trumpets perhaps, but I don't really hear anything. So yeah, I've got that, and I've just got all of these now set, just so Omni. But this is literally a full orchestra now. Just going to change the brass to long. So there we go. So you can, if you wanted to, you could just create a whole orchestral ensemble from this, can't you? And
it's an amazing way of creating texture. And if you imagine like some kind of then laying that down as like your bed, and then you could put in like ostinatos or string lines all over the top. You can very quickly kind of build up a sound world with using those sort of sounds. I find they're almost inspiration as well. Like if you run out of ideas and it's like blank canvas syndrome, you sat there like going, I don't know what I'm going to do. Then it's a great way of just sort of opening up your ears and going, this is something new.
yeah. So just before we move on then, Damo has just asked how we do multi-patches in Kontakt. So I'm just going to show that, okay?
Okay, you do that.
I'm just going to put in, so this is one of my own libraries, Violin Swells, but this is the Hacked Violins orchestral spread, which basically just means it's like I just stretched the violin so it went down to like C0. So this is what this sounds like. And if I wanted to add something else with it, say I wanted, so I'll put another one in here. I'm just going to put my kalimba in there as well. And I'm doing this. Is it saying that it doesn't know where the patches are? Oh, that's scary, isn't it?
Just click search Spotlight. It'll find them immediately.
Yeah. There we go. So this is because. Is it still
if you click search Spotlight, it should find it.
Oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I'll use a different one. That is because I've recently just done a system restore, which was so annoying. it was really, really, really annoying. I'll use the wonky guitar that I used the other week. Okay, so this is just like an instrument that isn't finished yet. But you go to the MIDI channel, and usually it'll be on port A, and it'll usually be on 2, 3, 4, or 5 if you add an extra one. Switch it to Omni, or switch it to port A1. Yeah, either one of them will do it. So now I'll be able to play.
It should layer them both.
And it should layer them. But then, so if I yeah, so make loads of really, really cool, unusual sounds, let's say, from that. And then, so that's how to do that. Just literally MIDI channel, Omni, or number 1.